the first major experience of my life and my generation where we were open to something more, some more energy and more possibilities are open to us. For me was February 1964 when I saw you on the Ed Sullivan Show. I couldn't, it was like something just swept over the whole country.
It was funny, wasn't it, huh?
Now, what the hell was it all about?
Was it that? I don't know. I personally think that, like in America, there was very much a way to do things. And the only slightly freaky things would be like the Hollywood writers or the jazz musicians or the pop musicians, the Elvises and so on, so they were being different. But in America, they were all still in a framework. Mm-hmm. And I think the British thing that we cooked up, we had a long time to cook it up quietly, make all our mistakes in private, mm-hmm. Hamburg, while no one was watching. By the time one of the big things about the Beatles, which I always think new groups should take as a bit of advice, was that we were cheeky enough to say we won't go to the States ever till we've got a #1 record. Which is a pretty cheeky kind of thing.
In the States, #1 record.
Yeah, in the States. So we were offered tours, but we knew we'd be second to someone, and we didn't want that. And there were a lot of artists still from here who go over, Sex Pistols, and just they vanish. Cliff Richard, still trying to make it in the States. And we always looked at it logically and thought, well, that's the mistake. They've got to go in as #1, then they're going to do. So there was a lot of careful thought here. We were cooking up this act, the Beatles. It was very European, very sort of British, as opposed to like the standard American way of doing things. Ed, a couple of jugglers, Sinatra Jr., even Elvis from the waist up. There was a very definite way that the Americans did it, the American dream. I just think that like Americans had it going one certain way, and the Beatles was just such a different thing that we'd been cooking up. We'd been taking all the influences from America, distilling them in a British way. A lot of things had been happening just with our own chemistry, because you had John and I who were strong writers, George who was like a third writer, Ringo who had like a good head on his shoulders and was by no means thick, and we were just developing our chemistry. We put in a lot of work. Hamburg used to work 8 hours a day, which most bands never worked that hard. We literally worked 8 hours a day, and it was a full factory day. So we had developed our act. By the time we came to America, we had a #1 record, which we'd worked that out. Mm-hmm. We were playing in Paris at the time, and Telegram came, and we all jumped on each other's backs and ran around everywhere. And Big Mal, the roadie, used to give everyone piggybacks everywhere. We were just so excited. So we went to America. There it all was what we'd planned might happen. Mm-hmm. But we were lucky, and it went much further than we'd ever imagined. But actually, we'd thought the whole thing out. And so there was like a combination of all this thing, America being what it was, and us coming with this whole new thing that we'd thought out, based on the old thing, but with our own sort of variations on it. All the little success we'd been having in Britain. The newspapers in Britain had been saying, well, what's left to do? You've conquered everywhere. And we'd say, America. So, oh yeah, of course, yeah. We'd say, America, watch out. You know. Got the #1, went to America, did Ed Sullivan. By then we'd like distilled our stuff down to an essence. So we weren't just coming on as just any old band. We had our identity, this total new identity for us.
Did you feel that among you? Was there a particular spirit?
Yeah, we knew it. Yeah. Well, people were saying, what's this with the haircuts? Now, if I go back on the haircut thing, I know it was actually because we saw some guy in Hamburg whose hair we liked. John and I were hitchhiking to Paris. We asked him to cut our hair like he did his. He didn't do it quite the same as his, and it fell down in a Beatles cut. His was actually more like this, coming over to one side.
Hitler, yes.
Not Hitler, but a kind of longer Hitler thing.
Yeah, no, I know.
All coming down. And we wanted that.
He was Lawrence, actually. That's the way his hair was.
He was a very sort of artsy guy, this guy. He was a great guy called Jürgen. He was a photographer, friend of everyone's from Hamburg. And he was living in Paris. He cut our hair. We just came back to England. All the people in England thought we were German because the newspapers said direct from Hamburg,
right.
The Beatles. So all the kids thought we were German. They were all surprised. We had leather jackets and blue jeans. We went out of that phase and went more suits because we were going to come down to London, and we developed the sort of suits thing, and we thought we won't have corny suits, we'll have nude kind of things. So we got those cardan jackets. We were working on the whole thing, and so by the time we sort of got to the States there, to say, for instance, the hair, what was really a bit of an accident, and it was really sort of what a lot of artsy people were doing anyway. We were the first with it in the States, so it looked like we'd invented it. Actually, the story was not half as exciting. It was much more ordinary, like life is. But by the time it actually got to the presentation on the Ed Sullivan Show, the biggest show in the States, and there we were with these funny haircuts, it was us. Everyone used to say, you started the Beatle haircut. And so it was like just distilling the whole essences of all these changes we were going through, and we just laid it all in one big move on the Americans. That's why it had such a big shocking effect, right?
When was it apparent to you that something was going on here that was more than just another very big group, that this was a cultural phenomenon? I mean, could you realize that at the time? Or
You don't get into that. I mean, anyone who's kind of successful, I don't think you get into that. I don't think Ali, when he was shouting he was the greatest, knew he was. I think it was bluff, it was showbiz. He suspected he was, we suspected we were. But a lot of what you did was just bluff. It's showbiz, you know, this is showbiz. You want to be number one, you better tell everyone you're number one.
But when did you realize, my God, it's worked? I mean, this is even more than just a musical event. This is a whole generation.
Very early on, we wherever we went, we started off in Hamburg, basically. And we started off having no audience, and we had to work our arses off to try and get people in. People would appear at the door of the club, and we were on stage and there was nobody at the tables. We used to try and get them in to sell beer for the manager. And we used to, the minute you saw someone, we'd all go, dance in the streets, or whatever was one of our big numbers. Dance in the streets is one of them. Dance in the streets tonight, and we'd pretend we hadn't seen them, and we'd rock out, and you'd find we got 3 of them in. And so we were very much trained on this idea of what do they call them, barkers, the fairground almost. You'd see 4 people, and we had to get those 4 people in. And so this knack is like very important, obviously, in showbiz, how to attract those 4 people in to sell 4 bottles of beer for the man who's paying us. We eventually sold the club out, and that, I would say, then we started to know it was going to be big, because we really started to get a Saturday night audience, which then started to be an all-week audience. Then we went to another club, the same thing happened there. Then we went back to England, and we started playing the Cavern. Same thing happened there. People didn't bother coming, then they started coming, they came in their droves. So we could see that each place we went at, whereas when we got started there was nothing. When we finished playing at that club, it was always like this incredible excitement had built up. And there must have been, we knew there was something we were doing that must have been right. So by the time we came down to play tours and stuff, it didn't really surprise us, although they were all thrills, but it didn't really surprise us that when we were on the Chris Montez tour, he was top of the bill. It didn't surprise us halfway through the tour when they switched it, and they put us top of the bill and him second. It was embarrassing. To hell for him, you know, what could you say to him? Sorry, Chris.
Right.
You know, and he took it well and stuff, but it was embarrassing. But we expected it by then. We'd seen that everywhere we'd gone seemed to work. And another thing we thought was that, like, all the old-time vaudeville performers were all saying, the trouble with today's entertainers is they've got no background. But we did. We always thought we had this ace up our sleeve of having this hard background in Hamburg. Or I did, anyway. I think the others felt similarly, you know. That here we were, we'd actually had done this grounding these old vaudevillians were talking about, of having grafted 8 hours.
Is that what, do you think that's what made the group able to weather the incredible pressures of that and last as long as
Yeah,
they
it
did?
didn't feel like pressures. It wasn't pressures, you know, for a whole long time. It's only when you actually, you know, I mean, people used to always ask the question in American conferences, press conferences, what will you do when the bubble bursts? There used to be a guy like yourself who we used to take around because he was so funny. We used to ask him to ask that question every time. And he did it. He came around to every press conference. That was the only question he ever asked on the whole tour. And he just got to be like a court jester kind of thing.
And what'd you say?
Yeah, you know, man, I don't know. We'll blow up, or I don't know, we'll fall down out of the sky, or so and so, whatever. But it was never a serious question to us. Of course, when the bubble did burst, or
when did it start to fragment?
To burst? I don't know, man. Just about a year before the Beatles broke up, I suppose. You could say the seed was sown from very early on. I don't know, really. It just did. Friction came in, business things came in, relationships between each other. We were all looking for, like, people in our lives. Like, and John had found Yoko. It made it very difficult. He wanted a very strong, intimate life with her. At the same time, we'd always reserved the intimacy for the group. so you were starting to find those kind of things were clashing really, with Yoko. You could understand he had to have time with her, but does he have to have that much time with her, was the sort of feeling in the group. And so these things just started to create immovable objects and pressures that were just too big. And then after that, after the breakup, then the idea of when will the bubble burst came home. You just suddenly think, oh, that's what that guy was talking about. Every bloody press conference. That's what he meant. And then I did think for a few years, heck, like the bubble has burst and so on and so on and so on. And so there was a fraught period there, kind really all those sort of things that people had always been saying, the pressures. I thought, oh, that's what they mean. These are the pressures, I finally understood what pressures were. Too much autographs and all of that didn't need to be too much of a pressure because we were a very organised group, the Beatles. And it was always, Mal, or one of our men, could always cool out the situation. We had it very organised. Mm-hmm. We were very much a well-rehearsed unit amongst ourselves. We knew the gig, we knew the whole thing, the press conferences, anything. It was just something we'd done a lot of. So it never used to feel that much of a pressure. Eventually, you started to realise what they were talking about, as I think a lot of people do just when they grow up. When you grow out of your teens and your 20s, you start to realise, wait a minute, I am really holding down a job here. And if my pay goes down, I'm out of a job and I've got 2 kids now. Those are the things that do start to occur to you later in life.
You can kind of freely go back into that period now and talk to me about it, and pull out things, which I think is also very unusual. Did it take a while for that to happen?
I've just done this clip, which is me playing all the instruments like I do on the album.
I saw that, yeah.
Which is, and I do Beatle Paul in that.
I noticed, yeah.
And it was my idea to do it because we had to think of someone we'd make the bass player like. And I kind of said, well, I could do Beatle Paul. And the director said, yeah, you've got to. And I said, oh, well, and I'd almost chickened out at the end of it. But once I did it and put on the old uniform, got my violin bass, which has actually still got a list from the Beatles, Stellar-tape to it, like an antique. The minute I'd done that, I didn't realise till a couple of days after that I'd actually had gone and broken the whole voodoo of talking about the Beatles, because I'd been him again. And I just actually stood there and it didn't feel bad. I said, it's a laugh, what the hell, I mean, if someone else is going to impersonate me, I might as well do it myself. And it was such a buzz amongst all the studio technicians. They all really got off on it. It was like, can I have your autograph?
Yeah.
And it was weird, It was really like I'd gone back 20 years or 10 years or whatever. It was a very kind of weird, exciting feeling, really, to just do it. And now
I feel like you were stepping back into that image for a minute and stuff.
It was great. I just felt great. I really was. I felt like I was at a TV show 20 years ago. Because it felt exactly the same. The bass was the same weight. See, the thing about the Hofner bass is it's like balsa wood. It's so comfortable after a kind of Fender or a Rickenbacker. I now play like a Yamaha or a Rickenbacker, which is so bloody heavy.
Why did you switch that Rickenbacker on that?
It was given to me.
Oh, really?
Mr. Rickenbacker came down, the kind of head representative, when we were in LA. And he said, but I'd like to give you a specially made left-handed bass. And it was the first left-handed bass I'd ever had, because the Hofner was a right-handed converted. It was a freebie, and I loved it. And I played it, and I started to get into it on Sgt. Pepper and everything. Hi, baby. And so that was like I said, really started to get into the Rickenbacker then. And then again, I must be a skinflint actually, because then now I'm playing a Yamaha just because they gave me one. So I'm anybody's for a free guitar. It was a bit funny, because I do sometimes think, wait a minute, I'm supposed to actually research what instrument I want to play best, but it happens so random. I've ended up playing stuff that's been given me, that I like, obviously. I've been given stuff I don't really like so much. But I like it like that. I like stuff happening like that. I don't like things to be too logical. I prefer to be non-technical. It's how I recorded this new album. It's why. I mean, the guy could have set me up with a beautiful console.
It's funny because it sounds very technical. It sounds very precise.
All the engineering is just me literally doing what I was doing there. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, if I get a vocal I don't like, I'd go boop, rewind, and zzz, erase, and that would be the vocal gone forever. I was just kind of totally ruthless and just played. I made the record as if it was on a giant cassette recorder. So as it was on a 16 track. But I'm suspicious of formulas. When a minute I've got a formula, I try and change it because I don't want a formula.
Boring.
There's people who used to ask us, what comes first, the words or the music, or Lennon and McCartney, who does what? It was never. It was always, well, we all do a bit of everything. I sometimes write words, he sometimes writes words, I sometimes write a tune, he sometimes writes a tune. Words sometimes come first, tunes sometimes come first. So, and everything always had this kind of... So like I've just continued doing it that way, and now I just kind of say, just listen. If it sounds good to me, if I think I've got a sound that I wanted, or it sounds better than what I wanted, and then I'll have it, I kind of accept it, and it's filed then, that's okay then. If I don't like it, I just erase it. And it was great fun, you know, because like I'd make some goofs on bass. Instead of doing the whole track again, I just stopped there, and from like 22 on the meter to 26, I knew I didn't like it, so I just go, gone. You know, and I could see some perfectionists or people saying, oh, don't lose it, leave it for posterity or whatever. But I was just being totally ruthless and enjoying it.
There was a Freudian slip before when you were talking about the Beatle thing and so on, about how you prepared for it, you know, and the setting up the group in Hamburg.
Yeah.
You said you kind of got the knack of knowing how to do this, which obviously the question is, what do you think of them? I mean,
I've actually only heard one record of theirs, the single, My Sharona, and this is all right. I haven't heard anything else, so I can't really comment on them. You know, I suspect they're kind of an okay pop group. Obviously, the Beatles of anything have had the most imitators and the copiers. Even when the '60s thing was going on, every friend of ours was a copier. I mean, you'll notice how everyone's hairstyles changed, including like Cliff Richard's and Elvis. The hair all suddenly came forward, you know. So like I'm kind of used to seeing everyone do numbers. ELO, and a lot of their stuff was very Sgt. Pepper inspired or whatever, you know. But
I Am the Walrus Forever.
I'm the Walrus again, you know. Again, I'm the Walrus. I'm still the Walrus.
Are you the Walrus, by the way? Who's John Wright?
The Walrus was a nothing thing, not meant anything about anyone. It was very read into, and what happened was when we did Magical Mystery Tour and portrayed it, I actually put on the Walrus mask, the one on that wall all swaying. Happens to be me with the walrus thing. We just picked up a head each. There's no thought behind it. All of our stuff, as you can tell from talking to me now, has never had really deep thought. I had a black carnation because they'd run out of red ones. And I said, all right, I'll have a black one, I'll have whatever you've got. So I got this hugely significant thing of a black carnation. I had my back turned on the Sgt. Pepper cover. It was actually just a goof when we were doing the photos. I turned my back, and it was like a joke or whatever it was.
I think it's amazing that you actually played bass better after you died, which was really impressive. But the other...
It's never been done before, yeah. Now, but I say, you know, imitators and stuff, it's a form of flattery, and I, in a way, feel slightly sorry for them rather than myself, because I figure, what are those Beatlemania guys going to do in the long run? Okay, they can have a bit of success here, a bit of success. I mean, I'd rather
if they were to imitate you, what they should be doing, in a sense, from everything
their own shit together,
is be creative in the
absolutely, you know, based on the inspiration that we gave them. Fine, you know, because it'll last longer, and I'd like to see them last longer. You know, having made it and knowing how bloody hard it is to keep making it and to continue in success. I'm really for anyone who can make it. I don't care if they're the world's worst Mrs. Miller. Or somebody, you know, I don't care. As long as they make it and it's what they want to do, I've got sympathy for them, you know.
So that's part of your affinity or your good feelings about New Wave, is you see that same creative element?
Yeah, I mean, I think the New Wave's a nice thing about it is kind of, it's got back to kind of real music rather than pop. I mean, I'd much rather see that than a lot of the stuff that was beginning to happen just to fill a need. It had to happen. I mean, I think that's all cool, you know. I don't like a lot of it. A lot of it, I can see where it's all come from. A lot of the riffs are right out of the Doors songbook. You know, a lot of it is well kind of Lou Reed and Bowie and Brian Ferry, and you can just trace it back, a lot of it. But that's great. I was influenced by Elvis. I still do an Elvis impersonation, you know, if you catch me at a party or something with McGee. I still do. There's a leak, you know, from Love Me Tender. I love it, you know. I mean, I recognise that we're all these very frail people, no matter who puts on the great show in the front. That basically we're all just these very frail people who all imitate, all copy. We used to nick songs, man. We used to nick titles, we used to nick everything. John and I,
know that when you
greatest cribbers going.
We didn't even know that the Chuck Berry songs and that type of thing we thought
nicks.
those were your original songs?
We had cover versions. which we didn't realise for a couple of versions. I used to know the crew cuts singing Earth Angel. And it's the actual real version supposed to be the Penguins. I got the autograph of the crew cuts at the Liverpool Empire. I waited around in my short trousers and they were nice. So, I kind of, I've been where all these people are coming from. And so I kind of sympathise with it, and rather than just stand there and get jealous because someone's younger than I am.
The criticism you've come in for, it seems to me, has to do with the fact that you use pop as a medium. What is it about pop that you are attracted to? It seems to be something that you like.
I just like it, man. I'm like a lot of people. When you get in your car, you turn on the radio and you want to hear some good sounds, and if you've got a really good radio station that gives you, which there's not a lot of, but if you get a really good station, that's the kind of stuff I love. I love to hear a great new track from Stevie Wonder, so that's the kind of stuff I'm into. So whenever I write for that. I don't. Sometimes I'll write like to try and write a hit. Sometimes I'll write to try and not write a hit. But just popular music seems to me like where it's at. Because what are the alternatives? To write a serious piece of music, boring. To write modern classical music, no thanks. I bore myself stiff after a couple of bars, I think.
Well, when you do write the stuff and so on, the themes that you generally go over and over again have to do with the home, domesticity, kind of a feeling of unity and a family feel and so on. I was wondering, did that come out of the whole craziness of the 60s? In a sense, were you trying to create
it came out of getting married, really.
It
came out of getting married, which is, you could call a creative womb. It's just when you get married and you haven't been married for 30 years, and I was what? At 29, I think, when I got married. Things change. Everything changes in the way you look at things. You look at through a partner's eyes, and you look and you learn new things. And I started to kind of realise that I liked the warmth of a family. And so when I got married, then a lot of my stuff did start, like the word home, changed its meaning. Instead of just being home, we're home, homeward bound. It started to really mean, hey, home, like I've never had a home for a long time.
Right.
Because I was very much bachelor for a long time. Started to realise, that that's important, this is important, so on, so on, warmth, and like being kind of blatant about your feelings and investigating them rather than hiding them. On this new album, I've got a track called Waterfalls, which is basically saying, don't go doing a load of dangerous stuff, because I need you. And that's a kind of more mature thought for me than I would have been able to have done 20 years ago. Because I just didn't realise that it's not all going to be here forever. That's the kind of thing you start to realise once you pass 30.
A lot of the images have to do with childhood. Do you feel did you have a happy childhood yourself?
Yeah.
Does that just sort of come up from your subconscious? Because, a lot of people have written and said that something as simple as a nursery rhyme has a lot of power to it.
Like Mary Had a Little Lamb,
yeah.
Something like that. That was totally, I don't put, the word round about the time was that I'd released Give Ireland Back to the Irish. It had been banned, or Hi, 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 one of them, which Ireland was political song, so it was banned. Hi, Hi, Hi was supposed to be drugs and sex, that was banned. And then the next single was Mary Had a Little Lamb, and people thought it was like my way of saying, okay, try and ban this.
Right.
But it actually wasn't. It was actually because my kids were very young, and anything I sang to them didn't make sense other than stuff like that. Once I started doing Bar Bar Black Sheep, they went crazy. But they were my audience. So I just did it as a single, Again, because I just thought, well, there are children in the world, we're not all grown up yet. And so for kids, that's hopefully a kid's record. We're not all, hopefully I'm not grown up. That's the worst is going to be to actually be grown up. But I'm doing quite well, actually. On that score. I haven't grown up an awful lot. But, you can say all of that stuff about it. I tend to just sort of dismiss it a bit and just say I've done some songs that I would think are really good. I've done some songs I don't think quite came off. Some I hate. But in the kind of whole story of it all, I've done enough to satisfy myself that I'm okay. That's basically all I'm looking for, like most other people.